Ethan suddenly quit smoking. This time, it felt like he truly meant it. He even gave away the limited edition lighters he'd been so proud of collecting. I laughed and asked, "That's sudden? Don't tell me you're having an affair." He paused, then looked at me with a helpless smile. "Of course not. There's a colleague at work who's pregnant. She can't stand the smell of smoke. You're not seriously jealous of a married woman, are you?" Chapter 1. It was noon. I sat in a cafe across from Ethan's office building, watching the lunch crowd spill out onto the street. Groups of coworkers headed toward nearby eateries, chatting as they walked. The sidewalks were packed, bodies weaving past each other in a steady flow. Even in the crowd, I spotted Ethan immediately. He was wearing the camel-colored coat I'd bought him, carefully guiding a thin, frail woman through the mass of people, shielding her as they moved forward. From where I sat, I couldn't see her face clearly. But I could see the tension in his expression, the way he watched every step she took, careful, protective. Nearby, a young girl roughhousing with her friends accidentally bumped into the woman at Ethan's side. His face darkened instantly. He shoved the girl away and snapped, "Watch where you're going. If you can't use your eyes, maybe you shouldn't have them." The girl turned pale, stammering apology after apology, clearly shaken by his sudden fury. The woman beside him quickly tugged at his sleeve and murmured something under her breath. Only then did Ethan rein himself in. The harshness drained from his face, replaced by concern as he carefully ushered her forward again. I watched him in silence. For a brief moment, he reminded me of a stray dog I'd had when I was a child. That dog had been fierce, barking at anyone who came near, ready to bite at the slightest provocation. But with me, it was different. It listened only to me. At a single command, it would tuck away its fangs, drop to the ground at my feet, and nuzzle against me, docile and devoted. For a second, the image overlapped with the Ethan in front of me, the one who used to obey me, who used to belong to me. Only this time, the realization came with a sharp sting. My husband, Ethan. The one he was devoted to now wasn't me. Chapter 2. I'd actually noticed something was off with Ethan long before this. At the beginning of summer, he suddenly bought me a small portable fan, one of those handheld ones that blows cool air. He'd smiled when he gave it to me and said, "Honey, this thing is powerful. You won't have to worry about the heat when you step out to grab packages anymore." Our mailboxes were right downstairs. I could take the elevator down, pick something up, and be back upstairs in less than 5 minutes. I couldn't imagine what I'd even need a fan for on a trip that short. Besides, I've always handled heat just fine. I'd never once complained to Ethan about being hot. So who exactly had told him that grabbing packages outside was unbearable? I'm not the type to bottle things up. The thought stuck in my mind, so I walked over with the fan and asked him directly. He froze, clearly caught off guard. After a long pause, he said, "Wasn't it you who mentioned it? I clearly remember you complaining about how hot it was when you had to go pick things up, so I bought it for you." He sounded so certain that I almost started doubting myself. Did I really say that? I had absolutely no memory of it. But Ethan insisted, swearing up and down that I had. He got so angry at being questioned that he dragged me into the bedroom and tossed me around all night in retaliation. The next morning, still sulking, he took the fan back with him. "Since you think I'm lying, forget it. I'll give it to someone else." I could only apologize over and over, coaxing him for days before he finally softened. In the end, the fan somehow made its way back to me. I never really used it, though. It ended up shoved into a corner and forgotten. Until now. Now I saw it in Ethan's hands. He had it switched on, holding it carefully near the woman beside him, angling the cool air toward her, as if trying to clear the thick, stuffy atmosphere around her. He stayed close to her all the way into the cafeteria. He carried her tray, picked out side dishes for her, even bought a bottle of warm milk and set it beside her after opening it. When she reached for her utensils, he stopped her. Then he pulled out a pack of sanitizing wipes and carefully cleaned each piece before handing them over. "You don't have to do all that," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion and helplessness. "I do," Ethan replied seriously. "You're pregnant. We have to be careful." She looked at him, clearly at a loss, but didn't argue. At that moment, another set of utensils was placed in front of him. He paused, frowning instinctively. Then a voice sounded beside him. "Wipe mine too." Ethan's head snapped up. The moment he saw me, a flicker of panic flashed through his eyes. Chapter 3. Anna. What are you doing here? He quickly smoothed over his expression. Why didn't you text me first? You scared me. I gave a faint smile but didn't answer. I simply set my utensils down in front of him, rested my chin on my palm, and said, wipe mine too. His expression shifted again and again, as if he wanted to speak but didn't know where to start. For a moment, the air between us grew tense. The thin woman sitting across from him spoke up. Hi, I'm Claire. She greeted me politely. You must be Ethan's girlfriend. He's mentioned you before. Her gaze lingered on my calm face for a second before she offered a small, apologetic smile. I'm pregnant, and I haven't been feeling well lately. Ethan's been kind enough to help me a lot. Some of it might have looked misleading, so I just wanted to explain, we're just coworkers. He's my supervisor. I'm married. She sounded sincere, as if she genuinely wanted to clear things up. But the moment she finished speaking, Ethan's expression visibly darkened. He said nothing, simply handed her the utensils he'd just finished cleaning. Claire accepted them naturally, murmured a quiet thank you, and everything resumed with an almost unsettling normalcy. She looked at me openly, without a trace of guilt or awkwardness. As if everything I just witnessed existed only in my imagination. Even Ethan lowered his voice and said, don't make a scene. Claire and her husband have been married 5 years. They finally conceived through IVF. Don't stress her out. We'll talk at home. When I didn't respond, his expression hardened further. He raised his voice. Anna. Did you hear what I just said? Chapter 4. His voice was loud enough that people at nearby tables turned to look. Curious eyes lingered on the three of us. Even Claire, who had been trying to eat calmly, began to look uncomfortable under the attention. She let out a long sigh, set her utensils aside, picked up the small fan, and stood. Ethan noticed immediately. He rose instinctively and reached for her. You barely ate. Are you not feeling well?
Yeah.
Claire glanced at me, her expression flat. You and your girlfriend should eat. I'm not feeling great. I'll head back and rest. She shook off Ethan's hand and walked straight out of the cafeteria without looking back. The milk, Ethan hurried after her, trying to hand it over, but Claire refused to take it. They struggled briefly at the entrance, one insisting, the other refusing. The bottle slipped during the tugging and crashed to the floor, milk splattering everywhere. I said I don't want it. Claire's eyes suddenly reddened. Let go of me. She slapped his hand away and ran off, leaving Ethan standing there alone, frozen in the doorway like an actor in a melodrama, staring after her as if his soul had just been ripped out. Quite the performance. I quietly added a few girls who'd been filming nearby and asked them to send me the video. Anna, what exactly are you trying to do? Ethan returned with a stormy expression, slammed his hand on the table, and demanded coldly, I told you already, Claire and I are just coworkers. She's pregnant and her condition isn't stable, so I've been helping her out. Do you really have to be this paranoid? Tell me, what do you want from me? Do you feel good pushing her like this? Making her uncomfortable? The questions came one after another, sharp and relentless. He clenched his fists, breathing hard, glaring at me like a decent husband driven to the brink by a jealous, hysterical wife. I simply watched him. I let him empty out every ounce of his anger before speaking. Are you done? Then can you wipe mine now? I slowly slid them toward him. Ethan froze, staring at me in disbelief. The next second, rage snapped through him. He grabbed the utensils and flung them to the floor. Anna, what the hell is wrong with you? Was something wrong with me? I didn't think so. I looked down at the scattered silverware and let out a quiet sigh. Then I stood, picked up my bowl of soup, and poured it straight over his head. You know what? This is what a wrong actually looks like. The broth and noodles streamed down his hair and face, soaking his clothes in seconds. Ethan stood there, stunned. A moment later, his eyes turned bloodshot. He glared at me, teeth clenched, and shouted, Anna. My response was to dump his untouched barbecue pork rice over him. Noodles and rice slid together into a mess on his head and shoulders. Before he could completely lose control, I stepped back, putting a little distance between us, and said with a sigh, let's get divorced, Ethan. I don't want to spend the rest of my life with a man who's out of his mind. Chapter 5. Anna, what are you talking about? My 2 sentences were enough to push Ethan to the brink. Covered in food, shaking with anger, he reached for me, but I stepped back and avoided his touch. Dirty, I said, frowning as I deliberately moved farther away. At the disgust in my eyes, he swayed slightly, disbelief written all over his face. I didn't want to argue anymore. I slipped past him and headed out, intending to go home. He stood there, frozen, and didn't follow. When I reached the entrance of the office complex, I hesitated for a moment, then turned around and walked straight into Ethan's building. I scanned the crowd and quickly found Claire, her face pale among the employees on lunch break. She was leaning back in a chair with her eyes closed, using the small fan to cool her face. I walked over calmly and took the fan from her hand. She looked up, startled and annoyed. "I'm sorry," I said evenly. "But this belongs to me." I pointed to the charm hanging from it. "This little cat charm? I bought it. My initials are engraved on the back. I still have the purchase record if you'd like to see it." Claire's face flushed red with anger. "Ethan lent that to me." "I never said you stole it," I replied calmly. I removed the pendant, then placed the fan back into her hands. "If you like it, you can keep using it." Our voices weren't loud, but it was lunchtime, and the office was quiet. Even the smallest sound carried. Several people nearby had already started watching. "Don't give it back to me. I don't want it." Claire's chest heaved as she glared at me, then she threw the fan straight into the trash. "If I remember correctly, you're pregnant," I said with a soft sigh. "Getting that angry isn't good for the baby." I picked the fan out of the trash and set it on Ethan's desk. "He lent it to you. He didn't give it to you. Why throw away something that isn't yours? And as far as I know, you don't really have the right to decide what happens to his belongings." Claire was speechless, her face tight with fury. Her hands clenched at her sides as she struggled to find something to say. "What exactly are you trying to do?" she finally snapped, her voice rising. "I already told you, Ethan and I are just co-workers. Do you really have to go this far? What's the point of chasing me all the way to my workplace? Do you have that little faith in your own man? Or in yourself?" Her voice had turned sharp, almost shrill. 4 sentences. 4 questions. She was clearly losing control. I watched her lose control, screaming, and said calmly, "Relax. I never said you stole anything. And I never said you stole someone's man. I just came to take back what belongs to me." Claire shot to her feet. She was trembling, one hand pressed protectively over her barely showing stomach, eyes red as she glared at me. "You. Don't push this too far." I was honestly speechless. I hadn't expected Ethan to be this incapable of understanding plain words. I hadn't expected Claire to be any better. I had nothing left to say to her. I shrugged and turned to leave when Ethan's furious shout rang out behind me. "Anna. Take it out on me if you have a problem. Leave her alone." Chapter 6. Ethan must have rushed back. He'd only brushed the food off his clothes, not even changed, before sprinting upstairs. The moment I saw him charging toward us, eyes red, I instinctively stepped aside. He was moving too fast to stop. He barreled straight into Claire and knocked her to the ground. Her cry of pain and his panicked shouts overlapped, loud and chaotic. "It hurts." Claire clutched her stomach, her face twisted in pain. "My stomach, it hurts so much." "Claire, are you okay?" Ethan's eyes were bloodshot as he rushed to help her up. "Where does it hurt? Tell me. Don't scare me. Let me see." 2 complete lunatics. I sighed at the sight of Claire writhing in pain and pulled out my phone to call an ambulance. The ambulance and the police arrived together. I'd called the ambulance. Ethan had called the police. When they got there, an officer asked, "Who reported this?" I did. Ethan grabbed my arm and dragged me toward them, teeth clenched as he snapped, "I want to press charges. She deliberately injured a pregnant woman." The moment the words left his mouth, I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Officer, look at her." His anger flared instantly. His finger nearly jabbed into my face. "Anna, how can you still laugh like this? Do you have no shame? Do you realize you almost destroyed a family? If anything happens to the baby, can you take responsibility?" I was laughing so hard my stomach hurt. I wiped the tears from my eyes and managed, "Of course I can't." But I didn't even touch Claire's finger. What exactly am I supposed to take responsibility for? Was I supposed to be accountable for everything that happened to her just because we happened to live on the same planet? Didn't he realize how absurd he sounded? Sometimes I honestly wondered if Ethan even had a brain. I've always been blunt. Whatever crosses my mind comes straight out of my mouth. He trembled with rage as he listened, his face twisted, finger pointed at me, ready to spit out another string of insults, until a police officer cut him off. Keep your hands to yourself. If you've got something to say it without touching her. After a sharp reprimand, Ethan swallowed his fury, shot me a cold glance, and turned to Claire, fussing over her again. The officers stayed behind to pull the security footage. Ethan and I accompanied Claire to the hospital for a checkup. The entire way there, he held her hand tightly, crouching beside her every few minutes, asking where it hurt, if she felt dizzy, if she needed anything. He handled registration and the lines himself. When it came time for the ultrasound, he even scooped her up in his arms and placed her on the exam bed. The doctor couldn't help but smile. You two must be newlyweds. Such a sweet couple. Ethan gave a faint smile, about to respond. From the doorway, I spoke quietly. They're coworkers. I'm the one who's actually married to him. The doctor's hand slipped slightly as she applied the gel, her eyes flicking between the three of us with open curiosity. Claire couldn't stand that kind of scrutiny. I'm not doing this anymore. She clenched her teeth and struggled to sit up. Ethan panicked and moved in immediately. Don't be stubborn. Think about the baby, you need to finish the exam. We've done nothing wrong. We don't have to feel ashamed just because someone's making accusations. As he said it, he kept glaring at me, the implication clear. As if this were his way of humiliating me. Right in front of him, I said slowly, the video of you carrying her just now, and the one from the cafeteria, I've already posted them in the company-wide Slack channel. The moment the words left my mouth, both Ethan and Claire froze. They turned toward me at the same time, their voices rising in sharp disbelief. What did you say? They scrambled for their phones. When they saw the videos were really there, Claire's vision went dark. She nearly fainted. Ethan, make her delete them. She forgot all about the exam, grabbing his arm, tears spilling instantly, her voice shaking. Make her delete them. The executives are in that chat. If this gets out, what am I supposed to do? How will they look at me? Chapter 7. Anna. Ethan lunged at me like he'd lost his mind, trying to snatch my phone. I didn't resist. The phone fell into his hands easily. But he couldn't unlock it. Because he didn't know the passcode. I stood there calmly, watching as Ethan tried his own birthday, then mine, and finally our wedding anniversary. Every single one was wrong. His frustration boiled over. He looked like he was about to smash my phone. What's the password? He shouted. Anna, I've never hit a woman in my life. Don't push me to that point. Tell me the password. Now. I took 2 steps back, putting a safe distance between us. Looking at his twisted expression, I clicked my tongue. Wow. That's not a flattering look. He froze for a split second, then exploded again. Anna. So loud, I muttered, shaking my head. I'm not deaf. Try speaking like a normal human being. And besides, you're the one asking me for a favor right now, not the other way around. His whole body trembled. His grip tightened around my phone. What exactly do you want from me? I folded my arms across my chest and answered evenly, if you're asking for help, you should at least act like it. In this world, yelling the loudest doesn't make you right. His jaw tightened as he glared at me, eyes sharp enough to cut. If looks could kill, I'd have been torn apart 1,000 times over. I wasn't afraid. I just glanced at the time and said calmly, you've got less than 2 minutes left. You sure you don't want to ask nicely? The window to delete the messages was about to expire. And yet he was still trying to force me into giving him the passcode by sheer volume alone. Sometimes I truly wondered what went on inside his head. Ethan. Claire's voice, raw and trembling, cut through the tension. Just one word was enough to make him crumble. He looked at her for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. With a thud, he dropped to his knees in front of me. Clenching his jaw, he spoke word by word. Anna, please. Tell me the password. You can blame me, hit me, curse me, I'll accept it all. But none of this has anything to do with Claire. She's pregnant. For the sake of that innocent child, please. Just do this one good thing. I'm begging you. As he spoke, his eyes reddened, as if he'd moved himself with his own words. Claire turned away, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. The two of them looked pitiful, wronged, humiliated, suffering. And somehow, I was the villain. even though I was the one who had been hurt. I lowered my gaze and looked quietly at Ethan kneeling at my feet. When our eyes met, I finally said, "The passcode is our wedding anniversary." Ethan frowned, instinctively pushing back. "That's not right. I already tried the anniversary date. It said the password was wrong." "I don't lie." I let out a quiet sigh. "Ethan, my phone password is our wedding anniversary." Suspicion flickered across his face. He quickly typed 0708 into the screen. Wrong again. His expression darkened immediately, as if he'd already convicted me in his mind. "You're lying to me?" "I'm not," I said calmly, meeting his accusing stare. "You just remembered the wrong date. Our anniversary is July 9th. July 8th is the birthday of the pregnant coworker standing next to you." Ethan froze. He looked up at me, shock written plainly across his face. Chapter 8. That can't be right. He hurriedly typed the new date. The moment the phone unlocked, his entire body went rigid, his expression dazed. I knew then, he remembered. I hadn't lied. Our wedding anniversary was the 9th. Claire's birthday happened to fall the day before. The dates were close enough that he'd mixed them up. I still remembered the 8th clearly. That morning, I'd casually reminded him to come home early. He'd hesitated, then said, "It's a coworker's birthday tonight. The department's going out for dinner. I might be late. Don't wait up." I hadn't suspected anything at the time. I just nodded, kissed him, "Goodbye," and watched him leave. Later that evening, I went to my usual salon for a haircut. At the corner outside, I passed Ethan carrying a massive bouquet of 99 red roses. I recognized him instantly. He didn't see me at all, the flowers were too big, blocking his view. I followed him at a distance, watched him walk into an upscale restaurant. Watched his face turn red as he handed the roses to Claire, who had clearly been waiting. He gave her the gift he'd prepared, gently fastening a necklace around her neck. Through the window, I could see her delighted expression, the way satisfaction lit up her face. I watched them stroll side by side along the river afterward, lingering as they said goodbye. I watched him stand downstairs, smoking 2 cigarettes before finally heading up, looking restless. That night, I said nothing. Asked nothing. Ethan, on the other hand, couldn't hold it in. He tossed a skincare set at me. I paused and asked, "Why did you buy this?" "An anniversary gift." Ethan lay in bed scrolling through his phone, barely glancing up as he answered, "Weren't you the one who said you were almost out of skincare last time? So I bought you a new set." When I didn't respond, he finally looked up, leaned over, and planted a quick kiss on me with a grin. "Why so quiet? Too happy to speak?" "Yeah, work was a little crazy today. I couldn't make it back in time to celebrate with you. My fault, my fault. How about I take you out for a nice dinner tomorrow instead?" I forced a stiff smile, eyes lowered, and murmured, "Okay." That had been our first year of marriage. We were supposed to still be newlyweds. And yet Ethan had already forgotten our anniversary. He thought it was on the 8th. On the 8th, who had he chosen to spend it with? Claire, or me? He'd already made his choice. When the phone unlocked, the first thing Ethan saw was a photo of the two of us, our faces pressed together, laughing. I was still wearing my veil in the picture, our fingers interlaced, both of us smiling like nothing in the world could touch us. It was the first photo we'd taken after filing our marriage license. Ethan stared at his own smiling face in the image, frozen, his expression tangled with something unreadable. "Anna, you." He pressed his lips together, looking up at me as if he wanted to say something. But the moment his eyes met my cold gaze, he faltered. After a long silence, he finally muttered, "Never mind." Chapter 9. Ethan hesitated for far too long. Long enough to miss the window to delete the videos. Claire's eyes burned red with anger. She lunged toward me, reaching for my face, but Ethan grabbed her and held her back. "Claire, it's fine," he said quickly, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Those videos don't prove anything. The executives know what kind of people we are. It'll be okay." The words had barely left his mouth when Claire spun and slapped him across the face. Hard. His head snapped to the side, and within seconds, a bright red handprint bloomed on his cheek. "Of course it's fine for you, you have no shame." Her eyes were red with fury as she shouted, "I'm not like you. My husband and I are perfectly happy. There's nothing between us. You're the one who kept inserting yourself into my life, insisting on taking care of me." Let me make this clear, if my husband even thinks about divorcing me because of this, I won't let you off the hook. And if anything happens to the baby I'm carrying, I'll make you pay for it with your life. She was practically screaming by the end. Claire, you're just saying that out of anger, right? Ethan's face had gone pale. He tried to question her, but the hatred in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. He swayed, looking as if he might collapse at any second. Seeing that, I quietly shifted a little farther to the side, just in case Ethan passed out and fell on me. Fortunately, he held it together. Even after the doctor pushed him out of the exam room and his body swayed as if he might collapse at any moment, he somehow stayed on his feet. Claire, thankfully, was fine. After reviewing the office security footage, the police returned and mediated briefly. Seeing Ethan pale and already taking responsibility, offering money and help, they said a few simple words and left the medical expenses for him and Claire to sort out themselves. Claire, meanwhile, never looked at Ethan once. She sat in her chair, treating him like he didn't exist no matter how attentively he hovered around her. It wasn't until the afternoon that Claire's husband rushed in. The slightly heavy-set man had barely appeared when Claire seemed to find her anchor. She threw herself into his arms and burst into tears, clinging to him like the most fragile woman in the world, as if no one else even existed. Ethan had probably never seen her like that. He stood at a distance, staring for a long time. After a while, he lowered his head and walked over to my side, his voice hoarse. Honey, let's go. I want to go home. Chapter 10. He reached for my hand. I stepped away immediately. His hand froze in midair. Too dirty. You're dirty and you stink, I said softly. Stay away from me, okay? When he was wrapped up in Claire, he'd grit his teeth and call me by my full name. Now that he'd realized Claire had never cared about him at all, he'd come running back, calling me honey, saying he wanted to go home. Where did he get the nerve? Did he really think I was some kind of recycling bin? Ethan stared at me, stunned. His hand slowly lowered, and this time he didn't argue. As we walked out of the hospital, he suddenly said, I didn't cheat. The words came out abruptly, low and dry. But I heard them clearly. Emotional cheating is still cheating. A betrayal is a betrayal, there's no point arguing over degrees of it. I let out a faint, mocking laugh. And it's not like you chose not to sleep with her. Looks to me like she just didn't want you. If Claire had shown even the slightest interest, Ethan would have jumped at the chance to book a room with her. There's no way he'd still be standing here, feeding me that line about how he didn't cheat. But unfortunately for him, while Ethan was completely devoted to her, Claire had only ever treated him like a convenient errand boy. His expression stiffened, clearly struck by how close I'd come to the truth. He pressed his lips together but said nothing. We got into the car in silence. Several times during the drive, he seemed like he wanted to speak. But each time he saw my eyes closed, my posture distant and unwelcoming, the words died on his lips. Then, as he watched the scenery outside, he seemed to realize we weren't heading home. Where are you taking me? He finally asked. The county clerk's office, I answered without hesitation. It's 3 o'clock. They're still open. We can file the divorce papers today. I'm not agreeing to a divorce. The words burst out of him almost instantly. Oh. I didn't take it seriously at all. I didn't agree to you cheating either. And yet he'd done it anyway. So what good was his refusal now? His face turned ashen. Knowing he couldn't argue his way out of it, he took a deep breath, forced down his anger, and pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I knew exactly who he was messaging. I didn't try to stop him. The moment I'd shown up near his office today, I'd already made up my mind. I was getting a divorce. No one was going to stop me. Chapter 11. When we arrived at the courthouse, the sight waiting outside actually made me laugh in disbelief. I'd expected Ethan to call his parents, maybe a few relatives, to try to persuade me. But I never imagined he'd have them bring his nearly 90-year-old grandmother, the one who could barely walk and relied on a wheelchair. Supported by others, the old woman struggled to her feet, trembling as she gripped my hands tightly. My good girl, she said, voice shaking. Ethan did wrong. I'll scold him for you. Don't be angry. Whatever it is, let's go home and talk, okay? Her face was full of pleading. I've never begged anyone in my life, but today I'm begging you. Give Ethan one more chance. A woman nearly 90 years old stood in front of me, crying, her voice breaking. Then she tried to kneel. I rushed forward to stop her. If she knelt to me, I'd never be able to live with it. I tried to hold her up. She insisted on going down. We ended up in a chaotic tug-of-war right there in front of the courthouse. Under the accusing stares of Ethan's parents and his two sisters, I finally managed to calm her down after a long struggle. Under her relentless questioning, I lowered my posture and reassured her again and again that Ethan and I would handle things properly, that we wouldn't let it turn into an ugly public scene. It took more than 40 minutes before she finally got into the car, surrounded by Ethan's family, ready to go home. Before she left, she carefully placed Ethan's hand and mine together and said, "It wasn't easy for you two to get married. You have to take care of each other and live well." Ethan nodded, eyes red. The moment the car drove off, I swung my arm with all my strength and slapped him hard across the face. He was still stunned when I slapped him again. And again. Hard enough to leave his ears ringing. "Anna, that's enough," he finally snapped, grabbing my wrist in frustration. "Not even close." I wrenched free, then grabbed my bag and started hitting him over the head with it. How could it ever be enough? Before, what he had with Claire had disgusted me. But now, seeing him drag his nearly 90-year-old grandmother here just to force me into backing down. That made me sick to my stomach. Physically sick. The sight of him made me want to gag. A man who cheats without remorse, then tries to salvage his marriage by using a frail old woman as leverage, he doesn't deserve to be called a man. "I used to think you were just confused," I said through clenched teeth. "That you'd simply lost your way in this relationship. Disgusting, but at least you had a line you wouldn't cross." I was wrong. Completely wrong. A man with principles doesn't cheat. Ethan is nothing but a parasite on society. And it took me until today to finally see him for what he really is. I lifted my foot and kicked him hard in the stomach, sending him to the ground. Then I spat at him, looking down as I said coldly, "Ethan, even if God himself came down to stop me, I'd still divorce you." Chapter 12. Ethan refused to divorce. No matter how clear I made my stance, he wouldn't budge. He insisted he'd only made a minor mistake, that he hadn't actually done anything wrong. Emotional cheating wasn't the same as physical cheating. It was just a moral lapse, nothing more. And without concrete proof, I couldn't use it in court as grounds for divorce. Ethan knew that. He knew that as long as he refused, there wasn't much I could do. Once he realized that, the tension left him. To make it up to me, he took several days off work. He hovered around me constantly, calling me honey this, honey that, acting as if nothing had ever happened. As if we could simply go back to the way things were. And I watched him perform. Silent. Unmoved. Every gesture of his, I treated like the act it was. By the third day, Ethan could barely keep up the act. When I turned down his breakfast again, he slammed the plate onto the table and demanded, eyes red, "Anna, what exactly do you want from me?" I made a mistake, one every man in the world makes at some point. I didn't even hold Claire's hand or kiss her. Do you really have to drag this out like this? You're acting like I committed some unforgivable crime. You've been walking around with that cold face for days. Sometimes, I honestly wonder, did you ever love me at all? 3 days of suppressed frustration finally exploded out of him. He wanted a fight. Even if I screamed at him or hit him, at least that would mean there was still something to salvage. Anything but this, living under the same roof like two strangers who just happened to share a house. He was desperate to dig out the infection named Clare, to pretend it could all be removed and everything would go back to normal. And I watched him the whole time. Silent. Detached. I said nothing. Just as he looked ready to lose control and smash every plate and bowl in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the time and walked over to open it. Uncle. Cousins. Uncle David. Uncle Sam. You're here. I greeted them one by one. Within moments, the living room was filled with 9 broad-shouldered men. My uncle. 3 cousins who trained in combat sports. 2 uncles. 2 gym-obsessed older cousins. And my younger cousin, home for break. They stood behind me, filling the space. Ethan froze mid-motion, the bowl in his hand hanging awkwardly in the air. Anna. His eyes flicked from one man to another. His eyelid twitched. Slowly, very slowly, he set the bowl down, his voice unsteady. What is this supposed to mean? I gave him the first bright smile I'd shown in days. Did cheating mess with your brain too? He could drag his entire family out to pressure me into staying. I could do the exact same thing. I didn't even have to say a word. The guys behind me moved before I even said a word. In seconds, Ethan was completely shut down, all his anger gone the moment he realized he was no longer the one in charge. I calmly went to make tea for my uncles. Listening to Ethan's cries. And thinking the air had never felt fresher. Chapter 13. Ethan didn't want a divorce. Fine. I could drag this out too. If he wanted to use his family to force me into backing down. Then I could bring mine. He could call in his grandmother. I could call in every relative I had. If he insisted he hadn't cheated. Then I could insist I'd been deeply wronged. Anyone can cry. I could play that role too. Even when Ethan called the police, it didn't help. He hadn't suffered any real physical injury. And this was a domestic dispute. All the police could do was mediate. Ethan tried to accuse my cousins of trespassing and harassment, claiming they'd forced their way into his home. I shut that down with a single calm sentence: they're my relatives. I invited them to stay. In situations like this, just like domestic violence cases, the police could only intervene verbally. They couldn't really do anything. Every time they came, I nodded along, agreed to cooperate, and acted perfectly reasonable. The moment they left, Ethan's brief moment of dignity never lasted long. Of course, he tried to run. But every time he did, I'd bring the entire group over to his parents' house for a visit. Once or twice, his parents could endure it. By the third or fourth time, even they couldn't take it anymore. They called him and demanded he come back and deal with the mess himself. After my cousins had stayed for a full month, Ethan finally gave in and agreed to the divorce. On the day we signed the papers, he was still wearing the coat I'd bought him. But everything about him had changed. He'd lost more than 10 pounds. His hair was a mess. His whole body seemed to carry a dull, defeated heaviness. Staring at the divorce certificate in his hand, he forced a strained smile. "Anna, believe it or not, I never actually wanted to divorce you." He tried to keep talking, but I cut him off. "Enough. Stop pretending. A stray dog would show more loyalty than you ever did." Only when it was over did he feel regret. Only when everything had collapsed did he finally realize what he'd lost. Where was all of this before? Someone like him wasn't worth my sympathy. His face turned ashen under my words, but he couldn't do anything. Behind me stood several relatives whose fists were about the size of his head. If he so much as moved, they would step in, just like they had for the past 2 months, and pin him down again. So he stayed where he was, eyes red, watching silently as I got into the car and left. After I drove away, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. A late, simple, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. I blocked him. Deleted his number. And that was it. From then on, we went our separate ways. As if we had never met. Chapter 14. Half a year later, in the early hours of a winter morning. A phone call woke me in the middle of the night. When I answered, I said hello twice, but the person on the other end didn't speak. All I could hear was heavy breathing. I was about to hang up in annoyance when, for some reason, I glanced at the number and frowned. "Ethan?" The moment I said his name, the call disconnected. That was all the confirmation I needed. It had been him. I added the number to my block list. But lately, he seemed to have lost whatever restraint he had left. After I exposed him, he stopped pretending altogether. Every few days, a new number, another long message. Each one was an essay. I skimmed a few of them and pieced together what his life had been like over the past 6 months. After our divorce, he'd been depressed for a while. Then he went back to chasing Clare. After the video incident in the company-wide Slack channel, Clare went out of her way to avoid him. She was terrified her husband might misunderstand and wanted a clean break, preferably with an ocean between them. Ethan, however, had never been good at reading people. She dodged him at every turn. He kept showing up anyway. Waking before dawn to make soup, bringing it to the office the next day, insisting she drink it. She refused countless times. Nothing worked. Frustrated and desperate, she finally reported him to HR for harassment. He was fired. That was when he truly unraveled. He couldn't understand how things had ended up like this. So he started following her. Harassing her. Desperate for some kind of answer. Eventually, Claire had enough. The next time he tried to approach her, she called the police. This time there was solid evidence. Ethan was detained for 3 days. After he got out, he didn't go looking for Claire again. Instead, he went straight to her husband. The first thing he said was, "The baby your wife is carrying is mine." He even pulled out the videos I'd taken as proof, trying to show how close he and Claire had been. Claire's husband exploded. No matter how much she explained, he refused to believe her. He insisted she undergo amniocentesis to prove who the father was. Claire dropped to her knees, swearing the baby was his. He didn't believe her. He dragged her to the hospital for the test anyway. Her husband had fertility issues. Claire's health wasn't great either. They'd gone through hell just to conceive this child through IVF. And after that single procedure, the baby was gone. The test results came back. The child had been her husband's all along. Claire's world collapsed. Her husband didn't say a word. In the middle of the night, he showed up at Ethan's place with a knife. Ethan called the police. Claire's husband was arrested. And somehow, after that, Claire moved into Ethan's apartment. She didn't divorce her husband. She simply settled in at Ethan's place, eating his food, using his things, ordering him around like he was nothing more than a servant. Some nights, she would deliberately pour ice water over him while he slept, pushing him to the edge of a breakdown. Every time Ethan tried to throw her out, she threatened to jump from the building, refusing to leave. Back and forth, they fell into a strange stalemate. Over the past 6 months, Claire had nearly driven him insane. And only then did he finally start remembering how good I'd been to him. Day after day, he stayed home, sending me long messages reminiscing about the past. Every word dripping with regret, confusion, helplessness. I read them carefully. Then replied with a single line. "Congratulations. Looks like you finally got what you wanted." He read it. And never replied again. The messages stopped after that, disappearing completely. Maybe he finally understood that I was no longer the Anna who had once loved him. When I saw the miserable life he was living now, I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, I wanted to applaud. Maybe even light fireworks to celebrate. His pain, his downfall, it was all a joke to me. Every bit of it was the result of his own choices. He made them. Now he could live with them. It had nothing to do with me anymore. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.